Good evening, people of Britain. My name's James Pope, and I would like to discuss some serious problems with you all. Um, we have lots of problems in Britain at the minute, some very, very serious problems. Our major systems are crumbling, things we rely on for our lives. The prison systems are failing, the immigration system is failing, the health system is failing, the government is a failure, both parties. The bureaucracy is ridiculous for everything. You need 100 rubber stamps just to get a house built. And instead of talking about all these problems and whinging about them and how people have failed and who should have done what, I would just like to simply address the root cause of these problems. Now, the root cause is very simple. As much as you all don't want to talk about it, as much as no party wants to talk about it, no leader and no politician wants to talk about this, it is simple. The problem is this: the national debt. Wait there. Let me just show you here. So, as you can see there's the national debt, right? Now that is our problem. That right there is our problem. You see, I'll zoom in so you can see better. Okay? Now look. The reason this country has no money is this. The reason they keep raising taxes and trying to cut here and cut there and move the money to other places is this. This is the problem right here, you see? So, because the country has this national debt issue, the parties take it, you can only do two things. You can either borrow loads of money and invest it, and hopefully those investments will make money for you, profit, and you'll be able to pay off that debt. Now, the other option is they try cuts and raising taxes. So they try and reduce the amount they spend, and they try and increase the amount they get by taxing us all more, which is why the Tories tried that with cutting us all and the bedroom tax, raising council taxes. You know, they've tried this stuff. You've all tried this rubbish. I'm sorry, it's not going to work. Neither one of these paths will lead to this problem being fixed. This problem has been going on and on since what was called and is called neoliberal economics. Now, neoliberal economics is where you run your country, the budget, on a deficit, and you use that money you're investing to try and build up the private sector and help businesses grow so that you get more tax receipts. Which is why we've ended up in a situation where businesses have more power than the voters, but we'll deal with that another time. So what happened is they've been running the UK budget on a deficit, a loss, every year near enough for 50 years now. So inevitably, when you run on a deficit, you run out of the thing you're managing. So if you ran on a deficit of food, you would starve. If you ran on a deficit of money, eventually you run out of money and then you have to borrow. And then eventually, you're almost bankrupt. It leads to bankruptcy. Because you sell your assets, you sell your valuables to try and make up the money to pay off the debt. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, this country currently has £3 trillion of debt. So if you look at this figure here, right, Labour, when they came into power in 1997, inherited 350 billion worth of national debt. It's a lot, right? Hell of a lot. Now, by the time the Tories came into power in 2010, our national debt was at 1.14 trillion. Now it's at 3 trillion. It's literally, so it was at 2 trillion before COVID. Do you know what I mean? The Tories love to try and blame COVID and Russia for this, but they went from 1.14 trillion to 2.2 trillion debt there in 2021. They still had another few years of office. This is not the most up-to-date graph, okay? So instead of dealing with this problem, what the government does is just distract you all. And in amongst the distractions of, things like this, the Tories pledged to get oil and gas out of the North Sea, but they haven't dealt with all the problems they caused in power. They ruined the UK immigration system. They removed and eroded workers' rights. They did lots of problems. Like, Theresa May announced they were going to remove government funding for public events like gigs and things, about 3 months before the Manchester Arena terrorist attack. So that actually gave terrorists a heads up of a gap in our security, and they took advantage of it. So we're constantly being bombarded with these distractions, unfortunately, so that you all avoid the real problem, which is this, the national debt. Because if the country has no money, it means it has to borrow money to resolve a problem. And if they can't borrow it because they've borrowed too much, they have to raise taxes. And eventually you end up in a situation where we are now, where we pay more money on that debt every day than we do for near enough everything else in the country. But it's never mentioned in the media. The newspapers don't mention it. The government doesn't talk about it. If they ever do talk about the national debt, it's always about lowering the deficit, making sure we're not losing as much money each year. So it's not about stopping Britain losing money. No. They try and stop us losing as much money. Now, there hasn't been, more than 2 years of Britain having a profit on a budget in my entire life. Bearing in mind, I'm 35. So in my entire life, my country has only managed to run a profit on a yearly budget maybe twice. In 35 years. So let me ask you that. Do you think a business could survive if they ran on a loss every year near enough for 30 years? Do you think any business in the world could survive that? No, they couldn't. So the reason they've done neoliberal economics is because it works. It does work. But every so often, you're supposed to balance out the deficit with a surplus, where you've made more money than you've spent, a profit, right? You're supposed to balance it out. And another problem is we've allowed private companies to start operating in the public sector. So we have private medical companies operating within the NHS. And that's fine, to help with patient numbers and cure people and help people, fine. But they're making money from that. And we do not have the public sector operating in the private sector. So over time, over the last 20 years or so, the private sector has essentially siphoned the resources and power off the public sectors. And the public sectors are now on the brink of collapse. Because, unfortunately, the government will like to blame everything else but themselves. The Americans ruined the price of the dollar and the economy's crashed, or Russia invaded Ukraine, it's COVID. It's always something except the government's fault, isn't it? They should prepare for these situations. They should have contingencies and backup plans. So if the economies of the world collapse, we are somehow protected. If the energy prices of the world skyrocket, somehow we are protected. If food prices all across the world skyrocket, we are protected. We have none of these protections. They've all crumbled away and slipped away over the last 50 years or so. So it's not the problem that neoliberal economics doesn't work. It's that it's been done wrong. Now, the reason it's been done wrong is because they got to the point where they had so much debt and couldn't afford to pay the debt, so they started selling assets. The gold got sold by Gordon Brown, idiots Labour. The Tory party sold off national industries, claiming they were failures when a business is only going to work if you try to make it work. If you accept it's never going to work and sell it, obviously another company must think it's going to work, otherwise they wouldn't buy it. We had Boris Johnson invest in an internet company called OneWeb that was supposed to be a satellite broadband company, competing with Elon Musk's Starlink, even though the UK at that time had no ability to send a satellite to space. We can now. Couldn't at the time. So Boris Johnson spent 300 million of taxpayers' money bailing out one of his friends, basically, in a failing company, a satellite internet company, when the UK couldn't even send a satellite to space. The same Boris Johnson who did the oven-ready deal, which implemented the current rules, laws and regulations after Brexit that we currently have a mass migration problem from. But he's off in the Bahamas on a beach somewhere, you know, getting 200 grand a year and guarded by like 5 MI6 agents. So, I mean, this is the problem. These are all distracted, and I get distracted by all the issues rather than the root cause. And the root cause of Britain's problems, regardless of, you know, the Tories wanting Angela Rayner investigated for her tax affairs. I'm sure she's done some dodgy tax in her time. I'm sure she has. The minister warning about people not being at school. If you're not in for the first week, then you're more likely to be absent. Well, I could have told you that. Like, anyone in Britain could have told you that the kids who are off for the first week in school are more likely to be off than the kids who aren't off. Like, it's called probability. It doesn't take a genius. And then this one, the Epping protest. What was the other one? Where's that? Oh, okay, never mind. There was the Epping protest, so you're all being distracted by, you know, the migrants are doing this, the migrants are doing that, and Reform's doing that. Reform's using fear and terror to try and achieve its political goals, which, by the way, is the definition of a political terrorist group, but sue me, that is the definition. If you use terror and fear to achieve your political goal, that is a political terrorist organisation. And Reform's kicking off with the Archbishop of Canterbury, isn't it? Because he thinks their plan to tackle immigration is wrong, and I think it is wrong. I agree it's wrong. I don't think mass deporting everyone is the answer. I think the answer is deporting people on a case-by-case basis. You know, a case-by-case basis, sure. But just rounding up a bunch of people and putting them on a boat and saying, fuck off, no. We're better than that in Britain. We're better than that. And if you don't think we are, you aren't better than us. You're the worst of us, that's why. There's decent people in this country who want to help people. And the thing is, I'm one of these people who wants to help people. But I don't want to help someone who has lied to the country to get in, is lying to stay here, and has taken the spot of a genuine refugee. You got to remember there are men out there who are lying to get into our country, and they take the place of a genuine refugee in the political system, in the asylum systems, and in the benefit system. So they're not just taking away from the country, they are taking away from genuine refugees as well. So my solution to that is quite simple. I've already solved it. You can implement my illegal mass migration solution. There would be no more illegal migration. And I recommend we have better legal routes. The only way you end the illegal migration problem is by closing all illegal routes and creating safe legal routes that are efficient, that can be dealt with and processed quickly. That's it. It's simple. It's not rocket science. There's loads of people in this country who have this funny idea we can't stop a few boats. We have nuclear, power plants. We have nuclear submarines. We have nuclear bombs. Are you telling me this country can't stop a few rubber boats? We stopped the Nazis. We stopped Germany in World War II. And you're telling me we can't stop a few rubber boats? No, it's the government doesn't want to. It's a very convenient distraction for all of you to pay attention to that while they do this problem over here. While they distract you with migration, they'll be changing your workers' rights. They'll be changing your civil rights. They'll be changing this law and that law. They've just changed it so that people with short prison sentences will no longer go to prison. So our country has just made it more difficult to be a criminal. Essentially. Because if you're going to do a short crime, which normally they're financial crimes, which rich people commit, funnily enough, then if you know you're not going to go to prison for it, you're more likely to commit the crime. Because you're not going to be punished for it. It's the same as if a child knows they're not going to be punished, they're more likely to do it. So thank you very much. This has been the Pope's Politics, but I would like to remind you all of the major problem in the UK. It is this. See this? That's the fucking problem. That is the problem. It's not the Tory party, it's not the Labour Party, although they're problems, you know, you all keep voting in a group of people whose main interest is themselves, and then you're all surprised when you find out they put themselves before the country. Like, what do you expect? If you put a Labour leader in charge, they're going to put the Labour Party and themselves first. If you put Tories in charge, they're going to put the Tory party, the Tory membership first. If you put Reform in charge, they're going to put the Reform membership and Reform first. What we need in this country is a neutral Prime Minister who's not affiliated with any party. You should not be allowed to be affiliated with any political party if you're Prime Minister. You're supposed to have a leader who's neutral, not this biased person who always helps their friends rather than the people. This isn't rocket science, people. It's not rocket science, but thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.